Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you, class? Today we will continue with chapter 7S, Capacity and Constraints Management. Okay, I will just remind you or recall with you what we have discussed last lecture. We have defined design capacity and effective capacity. Okay, and we have also discussed the two measures, the two performance measures, which is utilization and efficiency. And as you know, we apply the utilization, the efficiency, the design capacity, and the effective capacity. We apply it in three examples. We have solved three examples last meeting, and I think it was easy. What you have to know is the two formulas of the utilization, which is equal to the actual output divided by design capacity, and of course the efficiency is equal to the actual output also, but it is divided by the effective capacity. Okay, today we will continue. We will see the relationship between the capacity, okay, اللي هي الطاقة الإنتاجية, as we have defined it last meeting, and we give example about, if you still remember, Petra University and so on, وفي الطاقة الإنتاجية للمصانع إلى آخره, and the strategy. There should be alignment between the capacity decisions of the company and the strategy, which means that before I clarify the relationship between capacity and strategy, I would like also I would like you to know that capacity decisions impact or affect, okay, or influence all 10 decisions of operations management. The 10 decisions, if you still remember, that we have discussed in chapter 1 when we started this semester. Okay, in chapter 1 I have already give you an idea about all 10 decisions of operations management, such as location decisions, layout decisions, quality decisions, design of goods decisions, inventory decisions, or inventory management, and so on. So imagine that the capacity decisions that you have to take, sometimes you have to take a decision to expand your capacity or to reduce your capacity. This will affect, now your decision here will affect not only the capacity itself, but these decisions of capacity, it will affect all other operations decisions. And not only that, if you can see here, it will affect also the other functional area of the organizations. And you remember before, we were always focusing at the start of this semester that there are three essential functions of any organizations, which is operations, and of course, what are the other functions except for operations? What are the other functional area here? You still remember? Okay, try to recall. The other two essential functions are marketing and financial and or accounting. So capacity will affect the three essential functions: operations, marketing, and finance and or accounting, okay, of the organization. Now here let's go back to the relationship between capacity decisions and the strategy. You have to make sure that your capacity decisions must be integrated, okay, with the company, what? With the company mission, strategy, as you can see here, mission and strategy, and also the common goals or the corporate objectives of the company. Yani, your decisions, before you take any decision with regard to capacity, look at your, for example, strategy. For example, maybe your strategy, one of your strategic goals is, let's say, to increase your geographical market areas. Yani, you want to increase your market share, let's say. Okay, so what you have to do, your decision should be to increase, let's say, to expand your capacity. So you see, I look at my strategy first, I look at my strategic goals, I look at the mission and vision of the company. Then based on that, I will take the decision to expand my capacity or to reduce my capacity, so that capacity decisions will be aligned with your strategy. Now, another thing that we have to take here, or we have to cover here, which is the capacity consideration. These are general considerations that you have to take it, or you have to look at it when making your decision to expand or not to expand your capacity. First of all, number one, forecast demand accurately. Yani you should have a very accurate forecasting. And you know, we have discussed in chapter 4 the forecasting techniques, okay, or the forecasting methods. And if you recall, we have at that time we had two types of forecasting: quantitative forecasting and qualitative forecasting methods. يعني quantitative methods and qualitative methods. Okay. يعني for example, from the quantitative methods, we have learned how to forecast our demand based on time series methods, let's say, like moving averages, the naive approach, exponential smoothing, the trend projection, and so on. And also we discussed the linear regression in the associative forecasting. Number two consideration that you have to take before you decide for your capacity: match technology increments and sales volume. We know that technology changes are dynamic. يعني technology is always changing. That's why you have to take into consideration that before you take your capacity decisions, you should know that if you, for example, if you buy more advanced equipment, okay, more advanced in terms of technology, then you can produce higher, okay, sorry, or larger volume, and of course, and then your sales volume will be higher. Also, another consideration that you have to take, which is you have to find the optimum operating size volume. Yani try as much as you can not to be over capacity and not to be below or under capacity. Yani it means try to really يعني try to have a size of capacity, or a capacity which will fit with the size of volume that you need. Of course, this will depend on your demand. Okay, why? Because if you are over capacity, then your cost will be high, and if you are under capacity, then you cannot satisfy the demand in your market. And of course, you will in this case you are going to dissatisfy your customers. Okay, and of course you will lose position comparing to your competitors. Number four consideration, which is very important point: you have to build for change, which means don't get locked in. Meaning to say, for example, if you want to invest in a university, for example, again, now don't build your university, for example, in a residential area. Why? Because if your number of students will increase in the future, then you cannot increase your capacity, because you will not have much land. You will not have land to buy in that crowded residential area. That's why, if you noticed, in all universities in Jordan, when they started, yani at the start, when they established those university, all of them, they started with area far from the cities, and far يعني a little bit far from the crowd, and far from let's say the residential area, so that if the number of students will increase and their project will be successful, they will increase, they will buy more lands, and then they can increase or expand their capacity in terms of buildings, lecture rooms, labs, and so on, and land, of course, also. Okay, anyway, so don't lock Don't get locked in. Make always your facilities, if you are a manufacturing company, make it flexible. Make your production line also flexible, so that in case of increasing in demand, you can expand. And in the case of decrease of demand, you can retrench, means you can reduce also your facility. Okay, so build your capacity in a way to be flexible, to be able to change it, to expand it, or to reduce it. Anyway, managing demand. Now sometimes, of course, demand may, يعني your capacity, sorry, your capacity sometimes it will lead or lag or straddle the demand. يعني sometimes you have more capacity is higher than demand, sometimes demand exceeds capacity. So what we will do in those cases, or in these cases, let's see first, when demand exceeds capacity, as you can see here, when demand exceeds capacity, what you have to do. Yani suppose that you have a lot of demand, but your capacity is less, then you cannot really produce and satisfy all the demands in the market. So what you have to do, there are techniques, let's say, or methods to do. Like the first one, cartel or reduce demand. Imagine يعني في علي طلب كثير، بس انا الكباسيتي طاقتي مش سامحه اني اوفر هذه الطلبيات كلها. شو بسوي؟ I will reduce demand by how? By raising prices. I will raise the price. Okay? If you raise prices, you will reduce demand. يعني this is your goal. Why? Because my capacity is not enough. I cannot tell customers that I don't have. I cannot, let's say, supply you. So what I will do, I will just raise prices. If you raise the prices, the demand will go down. Okay, it will decline. And in this case, you can match your capacity, or you can match demand with your capacity. Another way that, or another method that you can do in order to match demand with capacity, when demand exceeds capacity, you can make scheduling longer lead time. I'll just give you an example here. يعني sometimes if you are selling, يعني if you are an agency, for example in Jordan for Toyota or Mitsubishi or whatever, then you are selling cars, of course. Then you have demand, high demand, but you don't have enough capacity. You don't have enough cars to really. And you know, when you buy a zero car, sometimes they will tell you, okay, the car will be ready in a week or 2 weeks or in a month, whatever. Now, if it's a week, make it longer. Make longer lead time, okay, in order to supply the customer with your product or service. So you will make longer lead time so that you can produce more. Why? Because my capacity is less than my demand. Now, if demand exceeds capacity at a new facility, for example, yani you have a new branch, new facility, whatever, what you can do? You can do aggressive marketing, which means that to move the demand to an existing facility. I will give you an example so that you will understand what's the meaning of aggressive marketing. يعني suppose that you have a branch, let's say in Amman, okay, and you have a new facility, يعني new branch for you in Irbid, new one, or let's say yes, in Irbid, for example. Now, if demand exceeds capacity in Irbid, in your new facility, okay, then you cannot supply the market with the product or the service that you are offering. So what you will do, you will make aggressive marketing. احنا بنسميه التسويق العكسي او العدواني، يعني بمعنى انه you will tell your customers انه okay, we don't have it, but you can, يعني you transfer them to your other branches. Okay, you can buy it from our branch in Amman, for example, and so on. And sometimes if you notice, they do that in pharmacy one. Sometimes okay, you want to buy medicine, let's say 3 or 4 kinds of medicine. Sometimes they will tell you, okay, we have this and that, but we don't have the other one. But now we will call our other branch, and we will send you there in order to have it in order to be provided for you. For example, this is what we do in order if of course demand exceeds capacity. Now, what we have mentioned here, the 3 points here, it's a short-term solution. Okay, يعني هذه حل مؤقت. But the long-term solution is when demand exceeds capacity to increase capacity. You have to think of taking a decision in order to expand capacity. Okay, managing, we are still in managing demand. طب how about if capacity exceeds demand? On the other hand, now a while ago in the previous slide we said يعني we learn what to do if demand exceeds capacity. طب how about if capacity exceeds demand? يعني I have يعني over production, I have units, I have service, okay, but the problem that the demand is less than the capacity that I have. So what I will do, I will do, you can stimulate your market. What's the meaning of stimulating market? يعني بدك تحفز السوق على الشراء, to increase the demand. How? By, for example, promotions. You can see for advertising, okay, make promotions, عروض, okay, and this is, and you can see this in the market, of course. You saw it many times when some companies, they will offer you a promotion which is attractive for you. In this way they are stimulating their market. Why? Because they have let's say their capacity exceeds demand. That means they have a lot of products and they want to sell it. So what they do promotion in order to stimulate their market and to encourage their customers to buy more and more. Okay, also another solution might be in the case of in the case that capacity is exceeding demand, is product changes. Sometimes يعني if you notice when we go to the mall sometimes, or to the large big supermarkets or any supermarkets, you will see that some items that we are buying, okay, either food or other things, they will tell you this is a new, okay, you will see مثلا new Crest for toothpaste, new one, a new let's say Nescafe golden, you'll see it's a new one. They will change the package, in the bottle, in the quantity. They will change anything. You can make يعني modification in your product in order also to increase the demand in the market and to of course your objective is to manage your demand and to of course increase it in order to meet your capacity. Adjusting also to seasonal demands, it's a way that you can do it. Sometimes some companies, they will produce products with complementary demand pattern in addition to what currently being produced. In addition to what is currently being produced. Means, for example, when you go to buy a phone, let's say iPhone, Samsung, whatever, sometimes you will see Huawei مثلا, they will offer you مع الباكج ساعة, watch, okay, يعني they are producing now الwatch, we call it complementary, okay, we call it a complementary product, okay, and I'm selling to you, or a Bluetooth with the phone, or a wireless charger, and so on. So you try in seasons what you will do in order to increase your demand. So you produce complementary products in order to stimulate and motivate your customers to buy your products. Now, changes in capacity may straddle the demand. It means that sometimes demand, our capacity leads demand, and sometimes at other times it lags demand, and so on. يعني when we say, يعني I just want to explain this statement, what's the meaning of changes in capacity may straddle. The word straddling means sometimes it's lagging, sometimes it's leading. Okay, now tactics for matching capacity to demand. Again, some tactics, some methods that you can use in order to match your capacity with your demand, because our objective is always to do that, okay, because as I told you, capacity means cost. يعني more capacity, if you are over capacity, means that you will have more cost. So what we'll do, making staffing changes. And sometimes we make job rotation. Yani if our operation now is slowing down and we don't have much demand, so we will change staffing. I mean, yani we will make job rotation for our staff to work in the marketing department, for example, temporarily. Okay, so you will, or making new shifts or reducing shifts in the company or in the manufacturing company or in the service company. Now, number two, adjusting equipment. You can also match capacity with demand by adjusting your equipment. How? Look at the first point here. Purchasing additional machinery. Of course, you will do this one. The first point, you will buy new machines or new equipments if, for example, if what? If demand, if demand exceeds capacity. So you will buy more machines in order to increase your production. But here, look at the second point, selling or leasing out existing equipment. And you will do the selling or selling some of your equipments when? If your capacity exceeds demand. Okay? So I want to check with you. Be careful. So the first point, when demand exceeds capacity, purchasing additional machinery, but selling or leasing out existing equipment, you will do that if your capacity exceeds demand. Also, another technique you can do, improving process to increase throughputs. Yani, if you still remember, if you recall in chapter 7, chapter 7 was process strategy, when we discussed the four strategies: process focus strategy, repetitive strategy, product focus strategy, and mass customization. Now, what you can do sometimes, you can improve, you can re-engineer your process in a way to increase demand. غير في الطريقة الإنتاجية تبعتك بطريقة to be more efficient and to produce more. Or you can redesign your product to facilitate more throughputs to increase capacity. Also, one time in chapter 5 in design of goods and services, I show you a bracket, if you still remember, in three designs of a bracket. Now, one of them, one of them was very complicated, the other one was less complicated, and the third one, if you still remember, was very much less complicated. Now, if you reduce, okay, if you let's say redesign your product, like we redesigned the bracket at that time, make it in a way to make it easier, okay, yani less steps to produce, then this will help you also. Yani if the products, you will reduce some parts, which in a way, of course, that will not affect the quality of the products and the futures of the products, then you can do that in order to also let's say increase the time of your throughputs, and in this way, of course, you can produce more in order to meet your demand. Adding process flexibility to meet changing product preferences. Here, make your process, your production lines, for example, because we say process because sometimes it is a service. Make your production lines more flexible. I'll give you an example about Pepsi in Jordan, for example. Now, Pepsi company in Jordan, they have, as you all know, they have a production line for Aquafina, water. Okay. Now, in high season, in summertime, the demand of the 2 liters Pepsi will increase. So what they do, they design the product line of Aquafina in a way that you can, in a way, flexible way, of course, in a way, or in a flexible way, that you can change only two bulb, okay, and you will shift. يعني لما تغير هاي البulb, okay, instead of, you can use it also for producing the 2 liters Pepsi. Okay, يعني you will stop the producing water, and you will use, in addition to the original line of producing the 2 liters Pepsi, you will use also the Aquafina line by a little bit modification. It will not take hours from you in order to produce in high season more 2 liters of Pepsi, as an example. Or close some facilities. يعني some companies, يعني for example, if your capacity, you have a lot of branches, and this is capacity, you have more human resources, more financial resources, more physical resources. Try to close some branches, some plants. إذا عندك أربع خمس مصانع سكر واحد. Okay, and in this case you can also, it's a tactic that you can match capacity to demand. Now if you are a bank, for example, also you can do that. If you have 30 branch in a certain city, make it 25, make it 20, okay, and so on. Now theory of constraints. What do we mean by theory of constraints? Theory of constraints, it's the goal of this theory is a process of ongoing improvement, is to make improvement on your process, in your operations, the process that you are using in producing, in operations, in servicing, or in manufacturing, whatever. You will try always, as I told you again a while ago, to improve it. Now how you are going to improve it? Now the theory of constraints, هاي النظرية, it says that you have to look for the limits or constraints that will let's say that will prevent the company or the organization to achieve its goals. يعني okay, sometimes I will give you an example. يعني sometimes you will go to a large supermarket in, let's say, in Carrefour, for example, or in any other supermarkets, and you buy your things, okay, but when you go to pay, okay, you will find a lines, okay, a queue, a long queues. Now this queues, we call it a constraint, we call it a bottleneck. Okay, so what you have to do, you can add more, for example, more queues, you add more cash. Now by adding more cash, this will facilitate, okay, or make it easy for you, or it will let's say prevent from letting that constraint, which is the queue, from slowing your work. In the production line they are doing the same, but be careful. Now the constraints or the limits, that's why we call it theory of constraints, could be physical process or personnel availability, the raw material or supplies. For example, sometimes, okay, I want to produce, but the problem that my raw material is not enough. Why? Because my suppliers are not really cannot really supply me with the quantity that I need every week, for example. So what you have to do here, you have to, this is a constraint. Why? Because it will limit you from producing the required, let's say, volume that you need for your market. That's why you have to solve it. Now if you will look for another supplier, for example, who can give you more materials, then you can solve the problem by using this theory. So this theory will look, always will tell you to look for what are the constraints that will really limit you, okay, from or prevent you from satisfying your market. Or it can be non-physical. يعني the constraint, it's not always physical like material، يعني نقص في الماتيريال او السبلاي او البيرسونيل. زي المول لما اعطيتك نقص في البيرسونيل، ممكن يكون تضيف لاين، تضيف كيو جديد مع موظف جديد. You will solve the problem, you will solve this constraint. It could be also, as we said, non-physical like procedures. انه البروسيجرز عندك it's يعني bureaucratic. or المورال. المورال means here مش هي مع اي، دير بالكم، هي معناها الروح المعنويه. هلا لو بدون اي، لو مورال بدون اي بتصير ethics اخلاقيات، بس مع اي معناها الروح المعنويه للموظفين. and training. يعني sometimes maybe the constraint, you cannot satisfy your market, you cannot produce more. Why? Because for example your employees need more training, okay, in order to add skills and knowledge for them in order to be faster in, let's say, in producing, for example. Or procedures, sometimes your procedures is too long. يعني في purchasing, for example, in your company, you know, in order to buy let's say raw materials you need a lot of procedures. إنه لازم يوقعها المدير الأول والثاني والثالث والرابع. It will take time so that you can reduce then this will be as a constraint and it will limit you from meeting your demands. So what we will do, we will reduce the steps in our procedures, for example, to do things. Now, recognizing and managing these limitations, as I said, is the basis of the theory of constraints. So, theory of constraints, in brief, in summary, always looking, okay, for any constraint that will limit the ability of the company to meet, okay, the demand of the market in terms of the volume that they are producing, either in manufacturing companies or in service companies. Okay, so you will look, you will find it, you will identify the constraint, then you will solve this constraint, then after that you will start looking for other constraints and so on. Now, break-even analysis. How to use break-even analysis, how to use it in your capacity decisions. Now, before we, of course, next meeting we'll start with our example and know how to use it practically. But today, just allow me to remind you. Of course, we have discussed break-even analysis many times, but I will just remind you with this. It's good also theoretically. You should know things before we go practically to our example for next lecture. I want to continue now with you what is break-even analysis theoretically. I know that we have discussed it in other chapters, but maybe here there is more theoretical details. It's a technique for evaluating process and equipment alternatives. You know that because we apply that. But I want to know that it is also applied for capacity decision and constraints management. And now the objective of break-even analysis is always to find, as you all know, the point in dollars or in units. If you still remember, I told you, in the break-even point, it could be in dollars and it could be in units, number of units, or it could be in dollars. If you want it in dollars, of course, it will be the price multiplied by the number of units. At which cost equal revenue. Of course, all of you, you know, the main idea of the break-even analysis is total cost is equal to total revenue. Now, break-even analysis also requires estimation. يعني حتى تستخدم. So in order to be able to use break-even analysis, we need لازم يكون المعطى معنا الجيفن fixed cost, total fixed cost, variable cost, and revenue. Of course, why? Because we will equal the total cost with the total revenue in order to find the intersection point, which is the break-even point when our total cost is equal to our total revenue. It is also, break-even is a powerful analytical tool. It's a good tool and useful for both. Not only for single product company. Now some company they have multiple products like Nestle for example, they have a lot of product lines, so it's useful in both cases. Also to remind you also, here it's very important, it's like a definition of the fixed cost. Fixed costs are costs that continue even if no units are produced. يعني اخوان الفيكس كوست تكاليف ثابته بدك تدفعها سواء انتجت ولا ما انتجت. Like what? طب مثل ايش الفيكس كوست؟ Like what? Such as what? Depreciation value of your equipments and machine. Your taxes you have to pay it whether you produce or not. Your buildings, especially in other countries of course. Your buildings rental cost. I have a rental. I am renting buildings. I am renting warehouses. I have to pay there. I have to pay it monthly or yearly whether I produce or not. That's why we call it, it's a fixed cost also. Like debt or mortgage payments اللي هي الرهن العقاري. التزامات شهرية. I have to pay it whether I produce or not produce. So the difference between the fixed cost that you will continue paying that even though that you don't produce any unit, but the variable cost of course will depend or will vary depending on the volume or the number of units that you are producing. يعني the more units you produce of course the more variable cost will be, such as labor hour خاصة اللي بيدفعوا بالساعة للعمال, materials of course I will not use for example 1 ton of the material طبعا for producing nothing. يعني it depends. If I produce more, I need more material, so my variable cost will increase, portion of utilities and so on. What's the meaning of contribution? I have defined contribution before. Contribution is the difference between the selling price and the variable cost. So, for example, if your selling price, let's say, is 10 JD and your variable cost is 4, then your contribution is 6. The contribution is the difference between your selling price, okay, per unit and the variable cost per unit. And you can take, of course, that as a total. Also, just to remind you, we are almost through with this lecture. Break-even analysis. Variable cost and revenues increases in direct portion. You know, guys, that the more you produce, the more you produce, the more your total cost will increase, and the more you have a revenue. I will discuss with you this 3 points through the figure here in the next slide, so that I will explain it to you in actual. لأني لو شرحت لكم إياها نظريا it will be difficult, but I will discuss it with you. Now this is the total cost line, which is the blue one, and this is the revenue line, total revenue line. Please look at the revenue function. A revenue function or revenue line starts from 0. It means what is revenue? Total revenue is equal to price multiplied by the number of units. Now, and this is the number of units here, the volume. Now, if you produce 0 units, then you multiply 0 by the price, then your revenue will be 0. But your total cost function, as you can see, total cost line, the blue line, does not start from the origin, from the 0. No, it started from your fixed cost. 200,000, for example. يعني you will start. ليش? Because we define a while ago that fixed cost are the costs that you are going to continue paying, okay, even though that you don't produce. حتى لو ما انتجت بدك تدفعهم، فهي المينيموم، ما في زيرو في التوتال كوست. واي؟ لانه الفيكس كوست، الرنتال زي ما حكينا، الاجار، ولا you have to pay it, electricity and so on, whether you produce or not. Okay, anyway, so you see this one starts from 0, but this revenue line, the revenue line will start from the fixed cost because it is the minimum cost that you can pay. Now, this point is the break-even point. It is when the total cost is equal to total revenue, and we talk a lot of example about this. Now, below this point, you are losing. Now, above this point, it's a profit for you. At this point exactly, you are not making profit, but at the same time you are not losing. That's why sometimes we'll use يعني لا انت ربحان ولا انت خسران بالضبط على النقطة هاي. هلا اذا بتنزل بلاين هون بفرجيك انه how many units you have to produce in order to be a break even point. And if you want it in dollar, it will show you in the y axis here, it will show you how much your revenue should be, okay, in order to be also a break even point. So you can calculate the break even point in terms of dollars, as you can see, or in terms of units. Next meeting, inshallah, we will continue with the break even analysis. القوانين طبعا, these are the formulas, we know it already, so that we can apply our example for next meeting. حتى ذلك الحين بتمنى للجميع السلامة. Okay, until then I hope I will see you all fine. Thank you very much.